right, we're gonna start chapter 11 now for the Lewis and Clark Expedition by Richard L. Neuberger. Okay, so you can see the picture. I think you can see it. Perfect. So this is called Bloodshed on the Plains. So they are headed back, right, to tell President Jefferson all that they saw. Summer had come again to the green and peaceful place which Lewis and Clark called Travelers' Rest Camp. The grass in the meadows had never been so thick and high. A moose with spreading antlers nibbled at the juicy forage. Gray squirrels scampered up and down the tree trunks. Bluebells and Johnny-jump-ups and other wildflowers brightened the scene with color. On the limb of a quacking aspen, a blue jay chattered noisily as it scolded a pair of furry beavers. These beavers were gnawing at pine trees along the rippling creek. Already they had toppled 2 trees across the stream. By winter, the beavers hoped to have the creek blocked with a dam, so they might move into a pond home. All the other sounds of the mountains in summer could be heard, too. A thrush sang its clear song. Several band-tailed pigeons flapped from branch to branch with fluttering wings. In the sky, a V-shaped wedge of Canadian geese flew north. A mountain lion with twitching tail stalked along the edge of the meadow. The beavers splashed into the safety of the water. The blue jay scolded more loudly than ever. The moose looked up suspiciously, then put its clumsy nose back into the grass. The moose knew that the mountain lion would never tempt those antlers which glistened like a bundle of swords. Hark! What was that, far off in the range? It was a new sound which the wild creatures of Travelers' Rest Camp could scarcely remember. Down the long slope from the ridge came the clatter of many pony hoofs. Blue jay and thrush listened to the babble of men's voices. These were not sing-song Indian voices. This was a strange tongue that the birds and animals of the green meadows had heard only once before. The white men had returned. The mountain lion bounded off. Even the moose sensed danger and slipped back into the dark forests, pushing aside underbrush and small trees as it went. The explorers slumped down wearily in the grass. Ordway mopped sweat. Oh God, I'm sorry. Sure. Sorry, guys. Kids. Okay. The explorers slumped down wearily in the grass. Ordway mopped sweat from his forehead. Well, he said to Pryor, the ridge wasn't as bad as last fall. I'll admit that. But I hope I never see that ridge again if I live until the year 1900. Pryor dipped a cloth in the cold creek and wiped his face, which was streaked with dirt. That goes for me, too, he said with feeling. The men of Lewis and Clark had come up the Columbia and over Lolo Pass, repeating the trail of the year before. With almost the last of their trade goods, they had paid the smiling Nez Perce along the Clearwater for taking care of the ponies through the long winter. But the men of the expedition saw their friend Kamiah wait no more. The Shoshones were a wandering tribe, and they had melted back into the ravines and canyons. Sacagawea had hoped for another reunion with her brother, but it was not to be. And now Lewis and Clark called the most serious council meeting they ever had held. The campfire that night was ringed with solemn faces. The sergeants, Ordway and Gass and Pryor, leaned silently against hemlock trees just outside the glow of the light. Lewis stood beside the fire, a paper in his hand. Clark stood beside him with arms folded. Men, began Lewis. Oops, watch out, buddy. I hold here the map I am preparing for President Jefferson.
Put it back.
You can play with it, but don't lose it, okay? I'm sorry. I don't know whether any other people will ever follow our trail into the fastness, but right now this map wouldn't help them very much. Too much of it is completely blank. Lewis held the map high over his head so all the soldiers at the campfire could see it. Then he continued, the continent of North America is a very big place, and we have to fill in some of the white space on this map. We haven't enough gunpowder and other supplies to roam all around this wild region for another year or more. but there is a way we can do the job in a hurry." Now Lewis outlined his bold plan. He proposed to split the expedition into 3 separate parties. Clark would follow last year's trail as far as the headwaters of Yellowstone. Then he would leave the trail and go down that swift stream up to the Missouri. Sergeant Ordway would pick up the canoes which had been sunk in the Jefferson River. Lewis would take 9 volunteers and explore the mountains off to the north in the direction of Canada. The party headed by Lewis would meet Ordway with the boats near White Bear Island. These 2 companies would voyage together down the Missouri. They would join Clark's party at the junction of the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers. It sounded simple, yet there was some doubt on the faces at the campfire. "I'm not optimistic," said Sergeant Gass. In so vast and trackless a land, 3 small parties of white men were no larger than a head of a very small pin. How easily it might be to miss each other entirely. Of course, the Mississippi River was always a thread which led back to the United States. Lewis added a final warning. "I think it is reasonable to say that we have been spared attack because we have been many. But Indians who would hesitate to attack 33 strangers might not feel the same about 8 or 9. There is safety in numbers, and now we are splitting our numbers 3 ways. Yet there is no way of helping it. We must take the risk if we are to do our duty." They were a somber lot in the gray dawn as they divided at Travelers' Rest Camp. All realized that the particular party headed by Lewis was moving into the greatest peril. His tiny band was entering the realm of the Blackfeet, fiercest of the tribes of the plains and foothills. In addition, this party would not be in familiar surroundings. For part of the time, at least, the parties led by Clark and Ordway would have the benefit of last year's experience. For this reason, Lewis was taking most of the ponies. He also had picked out the fleetest ones. Lewis raised himself on the back of his pony and lifted his hand silently in farewell. Up to him came Clark's parting cry, "Good luck!" With Gass as his principal aide, Lewis crossed the mountains at a wide gap in the Rockies, which Drouillard thought should be named Lewis and Clark Pass. They came down into a narrow valley full of buffalo. It was a sea of animals. The bellowing of the bulls sounded like thunder. The horses danced in fright, and the white men had to circle the herd cautiously. Lewis believed the little valley held 20,000 milling beasts. Long after they had passed the great herd, Lewis saw a lone buffalo writhing in pain on the ground. The animal had a gaping wound in his shoulder. From the wound protruded an arrow. Blackfeet! At the crest of a low hill, they met 8 mounted Indians. With Drouillard acting as interpreter, a powwow was held. Lewis was disturbed to notice that these Indians accepted with stony expressions his gifts of handkerchiefs, a flag, and a medal. The Blackfeet also wanted to camp with them at night. A few of the white men were afraid, but Lewis replied tersely, "Mr. Jefferson wants to know about these people. We shall find out." And that night they did. Drouillard, a wilderness man who slept as lightly as a cat, woke to find his rifle being slipped away by one of the Blackfeet. "Let go of my gun!" he shouted. Reuben Fields, one of the Kentucky mountaineers, was out of his blanket in a flash. He leaped on the Indian with his hunting knife. The blade was driven into the Indian's naked back. The Blackfoot slid to earth, dead. The camp was suddenly alive. Another Blackfoot had taken Lewis's pistol from his belt while he slept. Drouillard drew a bead on the thief in the bright prairie moonlight, but Lewis knocked up his gun. "We're under orders to avoid bloodshed, if possible," he cautioned. Drouillard looked at his captain angrily. "It is not possible with these people," he answered. But Lewis had to go back on his own orders. Another Blackfoot was trying to stampede the expedition's tethered ponies. This would be a calamity. To be in the heart of a hostile country without horses? Lewis shot the Indian in the stomach. Before he died, the Blackfoot returned a shot that whisked off Lewis's fur hat. Evidently, other guns had been stolen that night. Here you can see the picture of them fighting the Blackfeet Indians, and Lewis and Clark, or Lewis and Juilliard. "Mount and ride!" cried Lewis. The 6 remaining Indians were disappearing over a hump of ground. The fight had not gone as they planned. Their strategy, apparently, had been to slip away all the guns of the white men in their sleep. Then the Indians would have been masters of the situation. Only Juilliard's alertness had avoided a disaster. The white men ran for the ponies. Lewis looked back at the shambles of their camp. He stooped to pick up the American flag he had given the Blackfeet in friendship the evening before. On the chest of one of the slain braves was the medal with the president's image. Lewis was going to rip it off the body, then hesitated. No, he would leave the medal with its inscription, United States of America. The Blackfeet had started the bloody fight. It was best that this savage tribe know that the soldiers of the Great White Father were men whose wrath was to be feared. Yet now the white men had to get out of the domain of the Blackfeet, and in a hurry. The Indians might return with the whole tribe. In that case, Lewis and his little band would be massacred. Furthermore, the other 2 parties of the expedition could know nothing of this encounter, but smoke signals might pass the message among the Blackfeet in a few days. The groups led by Clark and Ordway would be in peril of ambush. They had to be warned. "We must ride, and ride hard," Lewis said. They made 121 miles before evening of the next day. The ponies gasped for breath. "On, old-timer," Lewis whispered to his horse. A few lumps of sugar remained in the bottom of one of their sacks. The men had saved the sugar for a feast when they finally would be on the Missouri again. Now it went to the faithful ponies to rally their failing strength. Often the white men looked back over the horizon. Once they thought they saw clouds of dust. They rode all night, picking their way in the darkness among mounds of sleeping buffalo. They killed a buffalo calf with a knife to avoid the noise of a shot. The flesh was eaten nearly raw. A long delay to roast the meat would cost them their scalps. The ponies were staggering when at last the party led by Lewis reached the river. They were overjoyed to find the dependable Ordway at the rendezvous with canoes. Lewis put an arm around his pony's head affectionately. "Goodbye, old-timer," he said. "I hope some good Indian gets you." They dropped down the bank and into the boats. The ponies were left on the riverbank grazing contentedly. Lewis sat gloomily in the canoe. Even a happy meeting with Clark downstream for the mouth of the Yellowstone did not raise his spirits. After more than 6,000 miles of peaceful travel, Indian blood had been shed. Lewis drew from the waterproof packet near his heart the letter of instruction handed him by the president. He read one sentence many times. On all your relations with the natives, treat them in the most friendly manner. Had he violated Mr. Jefferson's orders? The others assured him over and over again that he had not. After all, he had only protected their lives. He could not carry out any orders from Mr. Jefferson if he had a Blackfoot spear in his breast. Yet Lewis worried that a war between red men and white had been started in the West, which might last for 100 years. And with that, we will end and we'll pick back up for chapter 12.